Welcome to our channel. The war was over, Germany had surrendered, the gates of Camp Seville stood open for the first time in 3 years. The American guards expected celebrations, tears of joy, desperate rushing toward freedom. Instead, they got silence. And then something nobody anticipated, a petition, "We request permission to remain in the United States." Lieutenant Sarah Matthews stared at the document, 43 signatures, nearly half the German women in the camp. She looked up at the woman who presented it, Ingrid Veer, 32 years old, former school teacher from Dresden. "You want to stay?" Sarah's voice came out sharper than intended. "You're free. You can go home." Home to what Ingrid's English was precise, careful. Dresden doesn't exist anymore. It's rubble. My family is dead, my school is ashes. She gestured to the other women standing behind her. Most of us have nothing left. That's not our problem, said Captain Morrison, the camp commandant. He'd been watching from the doorway. We're not running a charity. You're German nationals, enemy nationals. The war is over, you go back to starve. Another woman stepped forward, younger, maybe 25, with a scar across her left cheek, to freeze, to live under Soviet occupation. Her voice cracked, "We've been here 3 years, we've worked, we've learned, we've changed." Sarah had seen the change herself when these women arrived in 1942, they'd been defiant, singing Nazi songs, refusing to cooperate. Now they spoke English, worked in camp kitchens and gardens. Some even helped in the local hospital. The transformation had been gradual, almost invisible, until you look back and realized how far they'd come before we discover what happened. With this unprecedented request, tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. Drop your location in the comments below. Ingrid Veer had been at Somerville longer than any other prisoner. She'd been captured in Argentina in 1942, suspected of being part of a German intelligence network. The charges were never proven. By the time they realized she was just a school teacher who'd fled Germany to escape an abusive husband. The war had escalated. Easier to keep her interned than sort out the paperwork. 3 years she'd spent 3 years in this Texas compound, and in that time something unexpected had happened. She'd found peace. The irony wasn't lost on her. A prison camp had given her more freedom than her marriage ever had. "You don't understand," Ingrid said quietly. "Going back isn't freedom, it's a death sentence. The cities are destroyed. There's no food, no medicine. The Soviets are taking women." She stopped her throat tight. "We're asking for a chance. That's all, just a chance." Morrison crossed his arms. "It's not up to me. This goes way above my pay grade. State Department, immigration, maybe even Congress." He looked at the petition like it might explode. "You realize what you're asking? You're enemy aliens requesting asylum in the country you were fighting against." "We weren't fighting," said the younger woman. "We were civilians caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Doesn't matter. The American people just spent 4 years hating Germans. You think they'll welcome you with open arms?" The silence that followed was heavy with truth. Sarah watched Ingrid's face. She'd gotten to know this woman over the years, quiet, intelligent, someone who'd survived through resilience rather than hardness, someone who'd lost everything and somehow managed not to break. "What would you do?" Ingrid asked softly, meeting Sarah's eyes, "if your home was gone, and you had a chance, even a small chance, at something better?" Sarah didn't have an answer. That night the petition sat on Morrison's desk like a grenade. By morning, it would be on its way to Washington, and 43 women would wait to see if the country that imprisoned them might also save them. The petition reached Washington in 3 days. The response came back in one request: denied all German nationals to be repatriated by September 1, no exceptions. Ingrid read the telegram and felt something inside her crack. She'd known it was a long shot. She'd known the answer would likely be no. But knowing and accepting were different things. They didn't even consider it, said Hannah, the younger woman with the scar. She'd gotten it during the bombing of Hamburg, a piece of shrapnel that should have killed her. They just said no. What did you expect? Elsa, a former nurse from Munich, was packing her few belongings. Unlike most prisoners, she wanted to go back. Her husband was alive, waiting in a British P camp. We're the enemy. We'll always be the enemy. Furthermore, we were never their enemy, Ingrid said. Furthermore, we were just in the way. Lieutenant Matthews found Ingrid in the compound garden that afternoon. The tomatoes were ripe, the beans climbing their poles. Ingrid had started this garden 2 years ago. The thought of leaving it felt absurd. I'm sorry, Sarah said. Are you? Ingrid didn't look up from the weeds she was pulling. Or are you relieved? The question hit harder than intended. Sarah sat down on the bench. I don't know, maybe both. She watched Ingrid work. You put roots down here, literally, Ingrid gestured at the garden. Metaphorically too, I suppose. What will you do? Go back to Germany, find whatever's left, try to survive? Ingrid's voice was flat. What other choice do I have? You could fight the decision with what I have, no money, no lawyer, no influence. Ingrid finally looked up. I'm a German woman asking America to let me stay after we killed their sons. There's no fighting that. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then what if someone fought for you? What do you mean? I mean, what if an American citizen vouched for you, sponsored you? What if someone with credentials said you weren't a threat? Ingrid's hand stilled. Why would anyone do that? Because it's the right thing to do. Sarah's voice was stronger now. You're not a Nazi. You never were. Furthermore, you're a teacher who fled an abusive marriage and got caught in a war. That's not a crime, Lieutenant Matthews. You could get in serious trouble. Sarah, call me Sarah. She leaned forward. I've watched you for 3 years. You taught English to women who barely spoke it. You mediated fights. Furthermore, you made this place bearable. Furthermore, you're not my enemy. Furthermore, you never were. The military won't care. Maybe not, but there are other avenues, civilian channels, churches, aid organizations. Sarah pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. I did some research. There are groups helping refugees. If you had a sponsor, a place to go, a job lined up, it might change things. Ingrid took the paper with trembling hands. It was a list of organizations: Lutheran Relief Services, Catholic Charities, Quaker Aid Society. Why are you doing this, Ingrid? Whispered. Sarah thought about the question. Why was she doing this? It was risky, it could derail her career. But when she looked at Ingrid, she didn't see an enemy. She saw someone who'd survived impossible circumstances and somehow remained kind. Because the war is over, Sarah said, and maybe it's time we stopped seeing enemies everywhere. That night Ingrid gathered the other women who'd signed the petition. She showed them Sarah's list. Some were skeptical. Most were desperate enough to try anything. We have 6 weeks, Ingrid said, 6 weeks to find sponsors, to prove we're not threats, to convince someone, anyone, that we deserve a chance. It won't work, said Elsa, probably not. Ingrid agreed, but I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. They started writing letters that night to churches, to aid organizations, to anyone who might listen, 43 women writing their stories, hoping someone in America might care enough to help. The responses when they came would change everything. The first response arrived 2 weeks later. It was from a Lutheran church in Minnesota. They were willing to sponsor one woman, a single mother with children. She would work as a housekeeper for the pastor's family room, and board included one woman out of 43. It's something, Ingrid said, though her voice was hollow. More letters came. A Catholic charity in New York could take 3 women to work in a hospital. A Quaker family in Pennsylvania would sponsor 1 woman to work on their farm. Each acceptance felt like a small miracle. Each rejection, and there were many, felt like another door slamming shut. By mid-August they had sponsors for 18 women. 25 would still be sent back to Germany. Ingrid wasn't one of the 18. "You should take my spot," said Hannah. She'd received sponsorship from a family in Iowa. "You organized this. You deserve it more." "No," Ingrid's voice was firm. "You're younger, you have more life ahead of you. Take the opportunity." The truth was more complicated. Ingrid had no family, no children, no special skills beyond teaching. The organizations wanted people who could contribute immediately: nurses, seamstresses, farm hands. A 32-year-old school teacher with no one to vouch for. Her didn't rank high on anyone's list. Lieutenant Matthews. Sarah found her crying in the garden 3 days before the transport ships were scheduled to depart. "I failed," Ingrid said. "I got 18 women out, but I failed." "You saved 18 lives and doomed 25 others." Sarah sat beside her. They'd grown close over the past weeks, this odd friendship between guard and prisoner. Sarah had used every contact she had, called in every favor. It wasn't enough. "I have an idea," Sarah said quietly. "It's crazy, it's probably illegal, but it might work." Ingrid looked up. "What if this incredible story of courage and hope is resonating with you? Please subscribe and hit that notification bell. These forgotten histories deserve to be told, and your support helps us bring them to light." "I could marry you." The words hung in the air like something fragile and impossible. "What?" Ingrid's voice was barely a whisper. "Wartime marriages, they're allowing them now. American soldiers marrying foreign women. There's paperwork, but it's legal. If we married, you'd become an American citizen. You could stay, that's you can't." Ingrid couldn't form complete sentences. "Why would you do that?" "Because you deserve a chance. Because the war is over, and we need to start thinking about peace. Because," Sarah stopped, her cheeks flushing. "Because I care what happens to you." The garden was silent, except for the wind in the bean plants. "You barely know me," Ingrid said finally. "I've known you for 3 years. I know you're brave, I know you're kind. Furthermore, I know you put everyone else before yourself." Sarah's voice softened. "I know that if our positions were reversed, you'd be trying to save me too. This would ruin your career probably, but I'll survive. Your family would disown you, they might, but I'm 31 years old, I can make my own choices." Ingrid's throat was tight. "This isn't some romance novel. Marriage is serious, I know. That's why I'm offering." Sarah met her eyes. "It doesn't have to be romantic, it can be practical. A legal arrangement between friends. You get citizenship, I get, I don't know, a clear conscience. And if they investigate, if they realize it's not a real marriage, then we make it look real. We share an address, we're seen together in public. We tell a consistent story." Sarah's voice was steady, despite the insanity of what she was proposing. "People have gotten married for worse reasons." Ingrid thought about Dresden in ruins, about the stories filtering back from Germany: starvation, disease, Soviet soldiers taking whatever they wanted, about the choice between an uncertain future here and certain death there. "I don't love you," she said quietly. "I know I might never love you. Furthermore, I know that too." "Then why?" "Because love isn't the only reason to save someone's life." Sarah stood up. "Think about it. You have 2 days." She walked away, leaving Ingrid alone in the garden with an impossible choice. That night Ingrid lay awake and wondered if accepting would be brave or cowardly. She thought about the other women still waiting for miracles. She thought about Sarah throwing away her career for a prisoner she'd only known through wire fences and guard posts. And she thought about freedom, real freedom, and whether she was willing to pay the price it demanded. Ingrid found Sarah the next morning. "If we do this, we do it right. No half measures, no second guessing." Sarah's face flooded with relief. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm out of time." "To be sure." Ingrid held out her hand. "We need rules, boundaries, a clear understanding of what this is and isn't." They sat in the empty rec hall and negotiated like diplomats. "Separate bedrooms," Ingrid said. "At least when we're alone," agreed, "but in public we need to seem affectionate. Hold hands, small touches, nothing dramatic, but enough to be convincing." "How long do we maintain this?" Sarah had thought about this. "A year, maybe 2, long enough for your citizenship to be secure. Then we can quietly divorce. You'll have legal status by then. You can make your own choices and your career. I'll resign my commission, take a civilian job. I was planning to leave the military anyway." Sarah's voice was steady, but Ingrid could see the cost in her eyes. The army was everything to Sarah. She was giving it up for a prisoner she barely knew. "I'll pay you back," Ingrid said somehow, "I don't know how, but I will. I'm not doing this for repayment." "Then why?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Because I watched my country put innocent people in camps for 3 years. I watched us become the thing we said we were fighting against. This is my small way of making it right." The paperwork took. One day a military chaplain who didn't ask too many questions performed the ceremony in the camp chapel. No flowers, no music, just 2 women, a chaplain and a legal contract that would change everything. "Do you, Sarah, and Matthews, take this woman?" "I do." "And do you, Ingrid Marie Veer, take this woman?" Ingrid thought about Dresden burning, about her husband's fists, about the impossibility of the choice she was making. "I do, then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you married under the laws of the United States and the state of Texas." They didn't kiss, they shook hands. It felt more honest that way. The news spread through the camp like wildfire. Some women were happy for Ingrid. Others were bitter. Why did she get to stay? When they had to leave, Elsa confronted her in the barracks. "You used her," Elsa said, her voice sharp with anger. "You manipulated an American soldier into saving you. She offered because you made her care. You played the victim until she felt guilty enough to sacrifice everything." Elsa's face was twisted with something ugly, jealousy or betrayal, or both. "You're no better than the Nazis using people, discarding them when they're no longer useful." The accusation hit like a slap. "That's not, isn't it? Will you still be married to her in 5 years, 10? Or will you divorce her the moment you have citizenship and find someone you actually love?" Ingrid had no answer because Elsa was asking she'd been avoiding. What happened when the arrangement ended, when Sarah had given up everything and Ingrid walked away? That night, in the small apartment they'd rented off base, Sarah made tea while Ingrid unpacked her few belongings. The silence was heavy with uncertainty. "You don't have to sleep on the couch," Sarah said. "The apartment has 2 bedrooms, right? Thank you, Ingrid." Sarah sat down the teapot. "Elsa cornered me today, told me I was a fool, that you'd leave the moment you could." I let her finish. "She's probably right. This is a business arrangement." "I know that." But Sarah's voice softened. "I want you to know that I don't regret it, whatever happens, even if you leave tomorrow, I don't regret giving you a chance." Ingrid sat down slowly. "I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" Sarah smiled, sad and complicated. "I have no idea. I guess we figure it out as we go." They drank tea in silence outside. Texas stretched into darkness, somewhere across the ocean. Germany was starving, and in this small apartment two women who barely knew each other tried to figure out how to build a life on a foundation of desperation and unlikely kindness. It shouldn't have worked, but sometimes impossibilities are the only things that do. The first month was performance art. They held hands at the grocery store. Sarah introduced Ingrid as my wife. At the post office they attended a 4th of July barbecue where Sarah's army friends asked polite questions and looked at them like they'd both lost their minds. "How did you two meet?" asked Captain Morrison's wife, her smile not quite reaching her eyes at the camp. Sarah said smoothly. "ING was teaching English classes. I was impressed by her dedication." "How unexpected." The woman's tone suggested other words she wasn't saying. That night, Ingrid scrubbed dishes while Sarah dried. The apartment was small, one bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for two people. Thin walls that meant they could hear the neighbors arguing 3 nights a week. "They hate me," Ingrid said quietly. "They're suspicious." "It's different, is it?" Ingrid set down a plate. "Did you see how they looked at me? Like I might pull out a SWAT sticker and start goose-stepping around the potato salad." Sarah almost laughed. Then realized Ingrid was serious. "Give them time." "How much time? A year? 5, 20? Ingrid's voice rose. "I'm German, that's not going to change. And they just spent 4 years learning to hate people like me." "You're not people like you, oh, you're you. Individual, human. That's not how hate works. You know that." Sarah did know that. She'd seen it in the camp. How easy it was to reduce people to categorize: German, enemy, other. How hard it was to see past the label to the person underneath. "I'm going to bed," Ingrid said. She left the kitchen without looking back. Sarah stood alone drying dishes that were already dry, wondering if she'd saved Ingrid's life, only to trap her in a different kind of prison the next week. Ingrid started looking for work. Teaching positions were impossible. No school board would hire a German woman, citizenship or not. She tried restaurants, shops, factories. Every application ended the same way: "We'll be in touch." They never were. "Maybe you should use a different last name." Sarah suggested Matthews instead of Weber. "So I should hide who I am." "It's not hiding, it's practical, it's lying." Ingrid's jaw was tight. "I won't pretend I'm not German, I won't be ashamed of where I came from, just because it makes Americans comfortable." "Then you won't find work, then I won't find work." The argument festered. Sarah took extra shifts at the Veterans Administration where she'd found a clerk position. Ingrid spent her days cleaning an apartment that was already spotless, growing more isolated and bitter. 2 months after the wedding, Sarah came home to find Ingrid standing at the window staring at nothing. "I got a letter today," Ingrid said without turning, "from Hannah, the girl who went to Iowa." "How is she dead?" Ingrid's voice was flat. "She killed herself 3 weeks ago, hung herself in the barn." Sarah's stomach dropped. Oh God. The family she was staying with found her. They said she'd been depressed, couldn't adjust, couldn't handle the isolation. Ingrid finally turned. Her eyes were red. She got out. She got the chance we all wanted and it killed her anyway. "Ingrid, was I wrong asking you to do this? Maybe Elsa was right. Maybe going back would have been better. You'd be dead, maybe, or maybe I'd have found a way to survive. People do." Ingrid's voice cracked. "But now I'm here in this apartment with no job and no future, married to someone who pies me. I don't pity you." "Then what do you feel?" Ingrid's question was desperate, raw, "Because I can't figure it out. You gave up everything for me, your career, your reputation, and I can't even get a job washing dishes. What was the point?" Sarah crossed the room and did something she'd never done before. She pulled Ingrid into a hug. Ingrid resisted for maybe 3 seconds. Then she collapsed, sobbing against Sarah's shoulder like something inside her had finally broken. They stood there for a long time. The neighbors' argument filtered through the walls. A dog barked in the distance and two women held each other in a small apartment trying to figure out how to survive the peace. Sarah woke up to find Ingrid gone. The apartment was empty, her coat missing from the hook by the door. Panic flared, and she left had. The news about Hannah pushed her over some invisible edge. Then she saw the note on the kitchen table, went for a walk, we'll be back. Ingrid returned 2 hours later with groceries and a strange expression, determined, almost fierce. I found something, she said, setting down the bags, a church, St. Michael's Lutheran. They have a community center. They help refugees. Okay, they need volunteers, people who speak German, to help new immigrants with paperwork translation adjustment. Ingrid's eyes were bright. It's not a job, it doesn't pay, but it's something. It's purpose. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. That's perfect. I start Monday. Ingrid began unpacking groceries, eggs, bread, vegetables, and I've been thinking about what you said about using your last name. I still won't hide being German, but legally I am Ingrid Matthews. Now maybe it's time I started acting like it. The work at St. Michael's transformed something in Ingrid. She came home tired but animated, telling Sarah about the families she'd helped, a Polish widow who couldn't read English forms, a Hungarian couple trying to find housing, a Czech man searching for relatives. They're all lost. Ingrid said one evening, just like I was, and I can actually help them, I know what they're going through. Sarah watched her across the dinner table, this woman she'd married out of desperation and pity, and realized she didn't pity her anymore. She admired her, respected her. Maybe even she cut off that thought before it could finish. 3 months into their arrangement, Sarah's mother came to visit. She'd been against the marriage from the start. She made that clear the moment she walked into the apartment, this is where you're living. Her mother's voice dripped with disapproval. Sarah, you had a career, a future, and you threw it away for my wife. Sarah said firmly, Mom, this is Ingrid. Ingrid extended her hand. Sarah's mother looked at it like it might bite Mrs. Matthews. Ingrid said carefully, I know this situation is unconventional, but Sarah saved my life. I'm grateful for that, and I'm trying to honor the gift she gave me by building something worthwhile here. You're German. Yes, my nephew died in Normandy, killed by Germans. The silence was crushing. Ingrid's hand slowly dropped. I'm sorry, Ingrid said quietly. I can't change what happened. I can't bring your nephew back, but I didn't kill him. I was a school teacher who got caught in circumstances I couldn't control, just like he probably was. Don't you dare compare, Mom. Sarah's voice was still. That's enough. Ingrid is my wife. She's part of my life. Now you can accept that or you can leave. Her mother stared at her. Then she picked up her purse. I raised you better than this. No, you raised me to do what's right, even when it's hard. That's exactly what I'm doing. The door slammed. Sarah stood frozen, her mother's perfume still lingering in the air. I'm sorry. Ingrid whispered. Don't be. Sarah's voice was shaking. She's wrong. She's the words caught in her throat. Ingrid did something unexpected. She took Sarah's hand. Thank you for defending me. Sarah looked down at their joined hands. When had that started feeling natural? Of course, she said, that's what partners do. The word hung between them, partners, not spouses of convenience, not a legal arrangement, partners. That night Sarah lay awake and admitted something she'd been avoiding. She cared about Ingrid, not out of guilt or pity or obligation. She genuinely cared what happened to this woman, wanted her to be happy, wanted to be the person who made her happy. It was terrifying. In the next room, Ingrid lay awake too, thinking about the same thing. Neither of them slept much that night. Yak winter came to Texas mild by most standards, but Ingrid had lost her tolerance for cold during her years in the camp. She wore sweaters, constantly huddled near the radiator, complained about temperatures that Sarah barely noticed. In Hamburg, winter meant snow up to your knees, Ingrid said one December evening. My brother and I would build forts, have wars that lasted for days. It was the first time she'd mentioned her brother voluntarily. Sarah looked up from her newspaper. You never talk about your family. There's not much to talk about. They're gone. Ingrid's voice was matter of fact, but Sarah heard the pain underneath. My parents died in the firebombing. My brother was in the Wehrmacht. Last I heard he was on the Eastern Front. He's probably dead too. I'm sorry, everyone's sorry. It doesn't bring them back. Ingrid pulled her sweater tighter. Sometimes I wonder if they'd be ashamed of me running away, marrying an American woman to avoid going home. You didn't run away, you survived. Is there a difference? Sarah set down her newspaper. Yes, running away is cowardice. Surviving is courage. You chose life over death. That's brave. It doesn't feel brave. It feels like cheating, because you lived and they didn't. Ingrid nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Sarah crossed the room and sat beside her on the couch. They'd been maintaining careful distance, separate bedrooms, minimal physical contact, except in public. But right now distance felt wrong. Ingrid, listen to me, your family wouldn't want you to die out of guilt. They'd want you to live, to build something, to honor their memory by surviving. How do you know? Because that's what love is, wanting the people you care about to be happy, even if you can't be there to see it. Ingrid turned to look at her. They were close now, close enough that Sarah could see the gold flecks in Ingrid's eyes, the faint freckles across her nose, the way her lips parted slightly. When she was thinking Sarah. Ingrid whispered, "What are we doing?" "I don't know. This was supposed to be temporary, practical, a legal arrangement." "I know, but it doesn't feel temporary anymore." Sarah's heart was pounding. "No, it doesn't." The space between them felt electric, dangerous. Sarah could lean forward, close the distance, turn this into something real. But that wasn't the agreement. That wasn't what Ingrid had signed up for. "I should go to bed," Ingrid said, but she didn't move. Probably Sarah agreed, not moving either. They sat frozen for maybe 30 seconds. Then Ingrid stood up abruptly. "Good night, Sarah, good night." Ingrid disappeared into her bedroom. Sarah sat alone on the couch, her hands shaking, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or narrowly avoided one. The next morning things were awkward. They moved around each other, carefully speaking, in polite half-sentences, avoiding eye contact. Sarah left for work early. Ingrid threw herself into volunteering with desperate intensity. That evening Sarah came home to find Ingrid in the kitchen making dinner, something she rarely did. "I made sour beeten," Ingrid said without turning around. "I know it's German food, and you might not like it, but I found a butcher who had the right cut and I needed to make something from home." Sarah sat down her briefcase. "It smells amazing." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was incredible, tender meat, rich gravy, the taste of a culture Sarah had been taught to hate. "This is delicious," Sarah said. "Thank you." Ingrid set down her fork. "We need to talk about last night." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Okay, I think." Ingrid chose her words carefully. "I think we need to decide what this is, because we said one thing, but it's becoming something else, and I don't know how to navigate that." "What do you want it to be?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Ingrid met her eyes. "When I agreed to this, I was desperate. I would have agreed to anything to avoid going back to Germany. But now," she paused. "Now I'm not desperate anymore. I'm just here, living in this apartment with you, and I don't know if I'm staying because I have to or because I want to. Sarah's throat was tight. Do you want to leave? No, that's what scares me. Ingrid's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't want to leave. I like living here. Furthermore, I like coming home to you. Furthermore, I like the way you make coffee in the morning and the way you fold newspapers obsessively and the way you defend me, even when it costs you. She stopped breathing hard. I think I'm starting to care about you, really care about you, and that wasn't part of the arrangement. The words hung in the air like something fragile and precious. Sarah stood up, walked around the table, knelt beside Ingrid's chair, so they were eye level. The arrangement was stupid, Sarah said. I was trying to save you. Without admitting that I wanted to save you, that I cared what happened to you, that I'd been watching you for 3 years and seeing someone extraordinary. She took Ingrid's hand. I don't want an arrangement anymore. I want something real, if you do too. Ingrid's eyes were swimming. I was married before to a man who hurt me, who made me feel small and worthless. I swore I'd never let anyone have that power over me again. Furthermore, I don't want power over you. Furthermore, I want partnership equals 2 people choosing each other. What if I'm not ready? Then we wait as long as you need. Ingrid pulled her hand back, not angrily, just carefully. I need time to figure out what I want, who I am outside of survival. Take all the time you need. That night they went to their separate bedrooms, but something had shifted. The walls between them were still there, but thinner now, more like curtains than concrete. It was a start. Spring came slowly. The Texas landscape turned green, blue bonnets bloomed along the highways, and in the small apartment 2 women navigated the complicated space between arrangement and affection. Ingrid took a job at St. Michael's, paid this time, as their official refugee coordinator. It wasn't much money, but it was hers earned, not given that mattered. Sarah got promoted at the VA handling benefits claims for returning soldiers. Some days were harder than others, angry veterans who blamed her for bureaucracy, bitter men who'd lost limbs or sanity or both. But she helped when she could. It felt important. They found a rhythm, coffee together in the mornings, separate work days, dinner together most evenings, unless one of them had to work late. They talked more now, not just logistics and necessities, but real conversations about books, politics, their pasts. I wanted to be a pilot, Sarah admitted one evening, when I was young, but women couldn't fly military aircraft, so I became a nurse instead, then an administrator. Do you regret it sometimes? But then the WASPs proved women could fly, and the military still disbanded them. So maybe it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Progress is slow, Ingrid said, but it happens. Look at us. What about us? A year ago we were prisoner and guard. Now we are. Ingrid paused. What are we exactly? Sarah smiled, figuring it out. The shift happened gradually, a hand on a shoulder that lingered, sitting closer on the couch during radio programs, small touches that weren't for public consumption anymore. One evening in May, nearly a year after their wedding, they walked to a park near the apartment. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ingrid sat on a bench watching children play. I got a letter today, she said, from the German consulate. They're processing repatriation requests. I could go back. They'd help me find housing, employment. Sarah's heart stopped. Do you want to? 6 months ago I would have said no immediately. Now Ingrid was quiet for a moment. Now I wonder if I'm staying in America because I want to or because I'm afraid to leave. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No, but I need to know the difference. Ingrid turned to face her. Sarah, I care about you deeply, but I need to know I'm choosing you, not just choosing safety. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to visit Germany just for a few weeks, see what's left, talk to people, figure out if there's anything worth going back to. Ingrid reached for Sarah's hand. "And then I'll come back, and when I do, I'll know I'm here because I want to be, not because I have nowhere else to go." Sarah wanted to argue, to say it was too dangerous, too risky. What if Ingrid didn't come back? But she understood. How could you choose something if you'd never seen the alternative? "Okay," Sarah said, "go see Germany, figure out what you want. Will you wait for me as long as it takes?" They sat together as the sun set, holding hands, both terrified of what came next. Ingrid left. 3 weeks later Sarah drove her to the airport, watched her board a plane to New York, then another to London, then finally to Hamburg. The apartment felt enormous and empty without her. Sarah threw herself into work, came home late, avoided the empty rooms that still smelled like Ingrid's perfume. The first letter arrived 2 weeks later. "Sarah, Hamburg is worse than I imagined. The city is rubble. People live in basement and bummed-out buildings. There's still rationing, still hunger. The Soviets are taking everything they can. From the eastern zone I found where my school used to be. It's just a foundation now. The building is gone, the neighborhood is gone. Everything I knew is gone. But people are rebuilding slowly, painfully. They're trying. I'm helping at a refugee center. There are millions of displaced people, Germans expelled from Poland and Czechoslovakia, people fleeing the Soviet zone. Everyone's looking for family, for answers, for any kind of future. I'm learning something important. Germany is my past, but it's not my future. I'll be home in 2 weeks. Yours Ingrid." Sarah read the letter 6 times, focused on one word, home. Ingrid had called Texas home. When Ingrid returned, she was different, thinner, tired, but certain. Sarah picked her up at the airport. They didn't speak during the drive, but when they got to the apartment, Ingrid set down her suitcase and turned to face Sarah. "I'm staying," she said, "not because I have to, not because I'm afraid, but because this is where I want to be." She stepped closer because you're who I want to be with. Are you sure, more sure than I've been about anything in my life? Sarah closed the distance between them. "Can I kiss you?" "I thought you'd never ask." The kiss was tentative at first, careful, then deeper, more certain. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "This is real now," Sarah whispered. "It was always," Ingrid said. "We were just too scared to admit it." That night they didn't sleep in separate bedrooms. They had a small celebration on their first real anniversary. Not the legal wedding in the camp chapel, but the day they'd admitted what they actually were to each other. Sarah made dinner, Ingrid brought flowers. They danced in the kitchen to music from the radio. "I never thought I'd be happy again." Ingrid set her head on Sarah's shoulder. "After everything that happened, the war, the camp, losing everyone, I thought happiness was something other people got to have. And now I think happiness is something you build piece by piece, with someone who sees you as you actually are." Sarah kissed the top of her head. "I see you, I know. That's why I stayed." Over the next years they built a life. Sarah became director of the VA regional office. Ingrid's refugee work expanded. She helped hundreds of displaced people navigate immigration, find housing, rebuild fractured lives. They moved to a bigger apartment, got a dog, attended church socials where fewer people stared. Now, though, some still whispered they couldn't be fully open about their relationship. The 1950s weren't kind to women who loved women, but they found community, other women like them living quiet lives, building families in the shadows. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. In 1955, Ingrid became an American citizen, not through marriage this time, but through her own application. She'd lived in the country for 10 years, contributed to her community, earned it. At the ceremony, Sarah watched Ingrid take the oath of allegiance. She was crying, not from sadness but from the weight of everything it had taken to get here. That evening they sat on their porch and watched the sunset. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. Everything you gave up to be here. Ingrid thought about it. I gave up a country that didn't want me, a past that was full of pain, a future that would have killed me. She reached for Sarah's hand. I didn't give up anything important. I traded ghosts for a life. Was it worth it? Every single day, years later, when the women's liberation movement started gaining momentum, Ingrid and Sarah attended meetings in their living room, young women full of fire and conviction, demanding rights that seemed impossible. Ingrid watched them and remembered being told she'd never fly, never teach, never matter. Do you think it'll work? One of the younger women asked her. The movement, I mean. Do you think things will actually change? Ingrid thought about Camp Somerville, about 43 women asking for the impossible, about 18 who got it, about one who almost gave up but found the courage to stay. Yes, she said firmly. Things change, slowly, painfully, but they change. I'm proof of that. If this story of courage, love and second chances moved you, please share it with others. History is full of forgotten people who refuse to give up, and their stories deserve to be remembered. Sarah and Ingrid lived together for 42 years. They never had children, but they helped raise dozens through Ingrid's refugee work. They never marched in a pride parade. Those didn't exist yet, but they lived openly enough that people who needed to know could figure it out. When Sarah died in 1987, Ingrid was beside her. The hospital tried to deny her access, family only, but their lawyer had prepared for this: marriage certificate, power of attorney, legal documents that proved what society still didn't want to acknowledge: they were family. Ingrid lived another 8 years. She died in 1995, surrounded by the children of refugees she'd helped decades earlier. They'd come from across the country to say goodbye to the woman who'd given their parents a chance. At her funeral, someone read from her memoir, a thin volume she'd published late in life, documenting her journey from prisoner to citizen. In 1945, I asked America to let me stay. I was desperate and afraid and had nowhere else to go. America said no, but one person, just one, said yes, and that one person changed everything. I learned that nations don't save people. People save people. One decision at a time, one act of courage at a time. I stayed in America, not because a government granted me asylum, but because a woman named Sarah Matthews saw me as a human being first and a German second. She gave me a chance. I built a life from that chance. To anyone reading this who feels like they don't belong, who's been told they're not welcome, who's running out of hope, you only need one person to see you. One chance, one moment of courage, yours or someone else's. Sometimes that's enough to change everything. The book is still in print, it's required reading in some immigrant education programs, and every year a few people write to say it saved their lives. Sarah and Ingrid couldn't have predicted that. They were just two women trying to do the right thing in impossible circumstances, trying to build something real out of desperation and unlikely kindness. But that's how history changes, not through grand gestures, through small acts of courage, through people who see each other as human beings first and everything else second. Through people who, when faced with the impossible, simply ask,